Over 99 billion served. McDonald's.
You gotta back off.
Every time you open up a food app or peel back a roll up the Rim to Win tab, you're participating in a system that is professionally designed to bring you back, not to convince you, to condition you. This is gamification, and food companies have been using it on adults and children alike for years. It uses the same psychological mechanics as gambling: variable rewards, near-miss outcomes, that feeling that the next one might be the winner.
That is sick. That didn't take us long. Oh my God, that was like...
Canadian law has codes for advertising and tools that apply to promotional contests, but none of them have been applied to gamified food marketing as a behavioral mechanism. The gap is, it hasn't caught up to the application in the food industry. This VIPER argues that gamified food marketing is a distinct and underregulated form of commercial influence, one that conditions behavior rather than persuades, that disproportionately harms children, and that the law urgently needs to address. You've probably done this before. You open up your app right before your order to check how many points you have. You've been saving up your points for weeks trying to get a free meal. I'd like to use my points. Maybe you're an adult doing all this. Starbucks Rewards isn't a kid's program. Tim Hortons Roll Up the Rim to Win runs during hockey season and targets the entire country. McDonald's Monopoly is a campaign that runs nationally and is aimed squarely at the family, which means parents and children both. It feels like a game, and that's exactly the point. For most of the 20th century, food companies advertised to us in fairly obvious ways: a billboard, a TV commercial, a print ad. The strategy was straightforward. Here's our product, here's why you should want it. You saw it, you processed it, and you made a decision. So that's what you would think. But even early food marketing, especially to children, was already beginning to move beyond simple persuasion, using radio shows, storytelling, and prize-based promotions, like prizes in cereal boxes. Something has shifted. Food marketing has always tried to bring you back, but it is now doing so in a more continuous and structured way. Instead of relying on occasional commercials or promotions, companies are building systems designed to keep you coming back through points, through prizes, through the particular thrill of almost winning. And for McDonald's specifically, this isn't a new instinct, but it has been amplified and refined. This matters because fast food consumption among youth has surged globally over the past few decades and is shaped by a set of interrelated factors rather than individual choice alone. Research highlights that the convenience, the affordability, accessibility, and the especially aggressive marketing strategies that fast food companies use play a significant role in shaping dietary habits. These marketing strategies often rely on enticing promotions that create strong brand loyalty among young consumers. When these existing dynamics are combined with gamified systems designed to increase engagement and retention, the result is not just marketing, but a structured environment that is reinforcing and repeating consumption over time and contributes to broader health risks. In Dr. Jacob Shelley's Wait for Justice course, we discussed how health outcomes are not simply the result of individual choices, but are shaped by broader structural conditions. Gamified food marketing fits directly into that framework with direct implications on weight and obesity. It is not just influencing isolated decisions, but systematically shaping patterns of behavior over time. The Happy Meal has existed since 1979, product designed entirely around giving children a toy with their food. McDonald's play places were built into the restaurant location specifically to associate the brand with play and fun in children's minds.
I've got the cheeseburgers, Carla.
Thanks, Ronald.
Rebel, I've got the cheeseburgers.
Our lunch.
Hamburger!
Ronald, hurry!
Over here.
Get back those burgers!
Ronald McDonald, a clown designed to be instantly recognizable and emotionally appealing to young children, became one of the most recognized brand mascots in the world. Gamification through apps and Monopoly promotions isn't a departure from this strategy, it's the digital evolution of it. The goal has always been the same: build an emotional connection early and keep people coming back. This video is going to make the case that gamified food marketing is a distinct and significantly underregulated form of commercial influence, that it uses the same psychological techniques as gambling, that it affects everyone, but is most dangerous to children, and that the law as it currently stands does not have the framework to address it. So what exactly is gamification? Scholar Fabian Groh defines it as the use of game design elements in non-game contexts. Take the mechanisms that make games engaging: points, rewards, challenges, countdowns, and apply them to things that aren't games, like buying a coffee or ordering a burger. Walk through the specific mechanics. You earn points for every purchase, you unlock badges for hitting milestones, a streak rewards you for coming back and purchasing something 3 days running, a limited time promotion creates urgency, collect all 4 Monopoly pieces before the campaign ends, and the prize, it might come or it might not. That variability in the reward is deliberate. It's the same principle that makes slot machines hard to walk away from. Here's the distinction that matters for everything that follows. Traditional advertising makes an argument for why you should want something. You encounter it, you process it, you decide. Gamification doesn't work that way. A 2021 systematic review by Kraft and colleagues identified the core principles through which gamification achieves its effects: immediate feedback on your actions, guided paths that nudge you towards specific behaviors, and positive reinforcement of repeated engagement. The result is not a one-time persuasive message, it's a behavioral loop. You're not convinced to buy, you're conditioned to come back. And it's working at scale. Research by Heracall and Berger found that gamified loyalty programs in the restaurant industry are associated with higher visit frequency and spending. Their survey of over 1,000 consumers found broad agreement that points-based reward systems increase the likelihood of returning. They also note that 87% of retailers plan to use gamification as a way to increase consumer engagement. This is not a niche marketing strategy, and it is now central to how the food industry operates. This matters for how we think about regulation. If gamification operates by shaping behavior rather than simply informing choice, then it challenges the assumption that consumers are making free and rational decisions, which is an assumption that underlies much of both advertising law and public health policy. Behavioral economics shows that this assumption does not reflect how people actually make decisions. Consumer behavior is shaped by biases, emotions, and the way choices are structured, not just rational evaluation. Gamified systems operate at that level. They guide behavior through repeated exposure and rewards rather than one-time persuasion, and this becomes even more significant for children. Canadian law already recognizes that advertising directed at young children is inherently manipulative because they lack the ability to fully understand persuasive intent. Current regulatory frameworks are not designed to address this. They assume consumers are evaluating information and making decisions based on content. Gamified food marketing does not operate at that level. It operates at the level of behavior. Now, let's talk about gambling, because this is where the argument gets sharp. Now think about what makes gambling powerful. You make a small repeated investment, a coin, a scratch ticket, a spin. The reward is variable. Sometimes you get a prize piece, and sometimes you don't. You never know when the win is coming. These aren't just similar, they're structurally identical. Gamblerware, a UK charity dedicated to preventing gambling harm, directly stated this in 2025. They warn that promotions like McDonald's Monopoly are normalizing gambling, especially for children and young people, and share many similarities with gambling systems that incentivize repeated participation and obscure association risks. And this is not a fringe observation. This is coming from a company whose entire mandate is understanding how these variable reward systems work and affect human behavior. Society already recognizes that variable reward systems require legal oversight. We have age restrictions on gambling, we have warnings on gambling advertising, and we have licensing requirements, spending limits, and enforcement mechanisms. And we treat gambling as a category of activity that requires special regulatory attention because of how powerful these mechanics affect your brain. Food companies are deploying the same psychological tactics, yet the same scrutiny is not applied because it is wrapped in a burger promotion instead of a casino. It falls entirely outside of the regulatory frameworks that we have built to manage exactly this kind of system. And there's one more difference worth noting. With gambling, the repeated behavior being conditioned is spending money. With gamified food marketing, the repeated behavior being conditioned is eating energy-dense, nutrient-insufficient foods like this. Every time the system brings someone back, they consume more food. Research on digital food advertising consistently showed that repeated exposure does not just influence brand preference, it shapes actual dietary intake. That is not incidental to this design, is the point. And this is not only a children's issue. Adults are not immune to the variable reward system. Starbucks reward streaks, roll up the rim to win, McDonald's Monopoly tabs. These work on adults with a variable reward system, work on human brains regardless of age. The difference is that adults have a greater capacity to recognize what is being done to them and choose not to engage. Children have almost none of that capacity, which is why children are the most urgent cases, but not the only one. We've established that gamification works on everyone, but the case for urgent legal action centers on children, and there are specific evidence-based reasons why. Start with McDonald's own history. The Happy Meal, the Play Place, Ronald McDonald, these were not accidents of corporate design. They were deliberate strategies to build emotional associations between children and the brand at the earliest possible age. When a child plays in a McDonald's Play Place, they aren't just playing, they're forming an association between that physical space, that feeling of fun, and that brand. And when a child gets a Happy Meal toy, they're not just receiving a toy, they're being conditioned to associate eating McDonald's with receiving a reward. Gamification is the digital continuation of exactly this logic, applied now through apps, collectibles, and prize draws that reach children wherever they are. The research bears this out. A 2025 study by Zulfikar and colleagues found a strong positive association between media exposure and brand loyalty in children aged 8 to 14, which is a correlation of 0.48. But the more significant finding, children as young as 3 to 4 years old can begin forming brand preferences based on emotional reactions to colors, characters, and experiences. This early exposure can encourage lifelong brand attachment. The brand loyalties being built by gamified systems during childhood are not temporary, they are designed to last. There's neurological evidence behind this. A study by Bruce and colleagues used brain imaging to examine how children respond to brand logos. They found that children's brains respond to food brand logos in reward-related regions. Food logos specifically are more emotionally salient than non-food logos, likely because of the survival significance of food as a biological necessity. The brand is activating the brain's reward system, and this is not a metaphor, it is measurable and documented. Arlene Elliott, writing in Critical Public Health in 2015, adds the policy dimension. She argues that the fun framing deployed by Big Food, of which gamification is a central example, reconfigures relationships with food, increases consumption, and distances products from any discussion of nutrition or health. Fun is just a diversion, and crucially, Elliott identifies gamification in children's food specifically as asking children to treat food as entertainment rather than as food. The child isn't thinking about what they're eating, they're thinking about whether they're getting the prize. Meanwhile, this marketing is reaching children everywhere. Rachel Prowse's scoping review documented exposure across homes, schools, grocery stores, and fast food restaurants. Her conclusion is that current Canadian regulatory approaches haven't reduced children's exposure to food marketing or its power. The system is not working. The Canadian Health and Scientific Organization reported that 82% of Canadians want government to limit unhealthy food advertising to children. They stated plainly that statutory regulation has the greatest potential to achieve the intended policy impact. That was over a decade ago. Federal action has not followed. This is ultimately a structural issue. Pettigrew and colleagues define the commercial determinants of health as the systems, practices, and pathways through which commercial actors drive health and equity. A child's interaction with a gamified food app is not a personal choice. It is one instance of a corporate strategy operating at population scale, and the harm it causes is structural, not individual. And this is not limited to individual moments. A digital marketing model published in Frontiers in Nutrition explained how repeated exposure across platforms, social media, gaming, online environments reinforce this behavior over time. Marketing cues trigger cravings, shape attitudes, and contribute to habitual patterns of intake that can displace healthier options. This matters for how we frame the legal argument. Throughout this course, we've consistently challenged the idea that health outcomes can be reduced to individual responsibility. Obesity is not primarily a problem of individual discipline or poor personal choices. It's shaped by structural commercial environments, what scholars call the obesogenic environment. Gamified food marketing is one of the most sophisticated tools currently being used to build and reinforce that environment, particularly for children. Regulating it is not just a consumer protection question, it is a public health question, it is a justice question, and it is a question this course is directly concerned with. So what does the law currently say? The answer is something, but not nearly enough, and not for the right things. Food marketing regulation in Canada is divided between federal and provincial governments, creating a fragmented system. At the federal level, Ad Standards administers the code for the responsible advertising of food and beverage products to children. And this code restricts advertising of products that don't meet nutrition criteria when directed at children under 13. It considers factors like the nature of the product, how the ad is presented, and when and where it appears. There's also the broadcast code for advertising to children, which limits scheduling and frequency of ads during children's programming and restricts certain persuasive techniques. Quebec goes further. Its Consumer Protection Act includes a statutory ban on all commercial advertising directed at children under 13, regardless of product or medium. Preuss's research identifies this as the only Canadian approach that has had a meaningful impact on children's food marketing exposure. Preuss describes three main mechanisms currently controlling food marketing to children in Canada: Quebec's statutory regulation, food industry voluntary self-regulation, and broadcast self-regulation. All three focus on traditional advertising. They aren't designed to address marketing systems that structure behavior through engagement, repetition, reward systems, to condition behavior. None of them cover things like the McDonald's monopoly, Starbucks rewards, or Tim Hortons roll up the rim to win when these target children. And the Canadian Health and Scientific Organization noted in 2013 that these codes are inconsistent in scope and have not been adequately updated to address new marketing mediums. This reflects a broader limitation identified in the literature. Regulatory frameworks often fail to keep pace with evolving marketing strategies, particularly in digital spaces where personalization, interactivity, and reward-based systems increase persuasive power. That was before app-based loyalty programs became standard. The gap has only grown. Even where the codes do apply, enforcement is complaint-based. No proactive monitoring. This limitation is consistent with findings from legal and public health research, which show that complaint-based and self-regulatory systems tend to lack transparency, accountability, and efficacy. By the time a complaint is resolved, a campaign has already run for months and reached millions of people. It is a system designed for a different era of marketing. Any regulation of marketing runs into the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Section 2B protects the freedom of expression, which includes the commercial advertising. So does that mean food companies can market however they want to, however they want? Not exactly. In 1989, the Supreme Court decided Irwin Toy Ltd. versus Quebec. The court upheld Quebec's advertising ban on the basis that children are a uniquely vulnerable audience. They cannot fully understand commercial intent, critically evaluate persuasive messages, or resist the psychological techniques advertising deploys. This recognition of vulnerability aligns with contemporary public health evidence, demonstrating that children are particularly susceptible to marketing techniques that shape preferences and consumption behavior. That vulnerability in the constitutional justification for treating marketing to children differently. Any limit on a charter right has to be justified under Section 1, using the test set out in R versus Oakes. The court asked two main questions. Is the objective pressing and substantial, and are the means proportional? For restrictions on gamified food marketing directed at children, the objective is clear. There is consistent evidence that these systems shape behavior and contribute to harmful dietary patterns at a population level. The means are also likely to be proportionate. A targeted restriction on gamified techniques, particularly those that rely on variable rewards and behavioral reinforcement, is directly connected to the harm being addressed and does not prevent companies from advertising more broadly. And this is not a blanket ban. It is focused response to a specific form of marketing that operates through behavioral conditioning rather than simple communication. And importantly, this reasoning aligns with existing case law. In Irwin Toy, the court already recognized that children are a uniquely vulnerable audience, and that limits on advertising directed at them can be justified. So the issue here is not whether the law can regulate these systems, it is whether it chooses to. So what's a practical legal response? The most feasible intervention is to expand existing advertising codes to explicitly include gamified marketing systems, starting with those directed at children under 13. This means redefining advertising, not just what is this message communicating, but also how is this system structuring engagement and behavior? Does it use variable rewards to drive repeated purchasing? Does it use progress tracking to build habitual use? Does it use time-limited collectibles to create urgency? This broader understanding of marketing is consistent with public health frameworks, which define marketing not only in terms of communication, but in terms of its effects on behavior and consumption. The Canadian Health and Scientific Organization provided the right framework in 2013. They define marketing as any form of commercial communication or message that is designed to or has the effect of increasing the recognition, appeal, and or consumption of particular products and services. They explicitly noted that this goes beyond the current legal definition of advertisement. Gamification fits squarely within it. Not every loyalty program would be captured. A basic stamp card that gives you a free coffee after 10 purchases is not the same as an app that's using streaks, variable prize draws, collectible game pieces, and push notification to habituate use. Legal frameworks are capable of distinguishing between low-intensity and high-intensity promotional tools and systems designed to systematically reinforce behavior. It just hasn't been asked to yet. Real-world evidence shows that what's at stake. In 2018, health campaigners publicly criticized McDonald's monopoly for encouraging families to buy more and larger portions of fast food in order to collect more game pieces. The more you eat, the more you play. The promotion is engineered that way. The World Health Organization's recommendation 9 is clear. The policy framework should specify enforcement mechanisms, including clear definitions of sanctions. A complaint-based system with no penalties does not meet that standard. And the broader question is whether the gambling parallel justifies restrictions beyond children, deserves serious policy attention. If we accept that variable reward systems are powerful enough to require legal regulation when deployed in casinos, the burden should be on food companies to explain why the systems should be exempt when deployed in fast food apps. Expanding an advertising code is necessary, but it's still working within a self-regulatory model that has already been shown to fail. What I think the law should actually do is more direct. A federal statutory prohibition on specific gamified mechanisms in food marketing directed at children under 13. Not a voluntary code, but an actual law with clear directions, definitions, proactive enforcement authority, and meaningful financial consequences for violations. Evidence from multiple jurisdictions suggests that mandatory regulation is more effective than voluntary or self-regulatory approaches in reducing children's exposure to unhealthy food marketing. The World Health Organization's recommendation 6 states that governments should be the key stakeholders in policy development and should provide leadership for implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. Not industry, governments. The Canadian Health and Scientific Organization called for this in 2013. More than a decade later, the federal government has not acted. Meanwhile, the systems being deployed have become more sophisticated, more targeted, and more embedded in children's daily digital lives. The proof of concept exists. Quebec's statutory ban is the only Canadian approach that Prowse found to have meaningfully reduced children's food marketing exposure. This aligns with broader international findings that comprehensive government-led restrictions are necessary to meaningfully reduce exposure and influence. The model works when there is an actual law behind it. And for the longer term, the gambling parallel needs to be part of the policy conversation. We built an entire regulatory framework around gambling because we recognize that variable reward systems require oversight. Food companies are operating those same systems, and the law has already recognized the need to regulate systems that shape behavior in powerful and predictable ways. The question is no longer whether these systems can influence behavior, but whether we are willing to regulate them when they operate in contexts that directly affect population health. Let's go back to where we started. You open the app, you check your points, you peel back the tab, you hold on to that Monopoly piece because you're one away from completing the set. It feels like a game. And here's what's worth sitting with. It works on you, it works on adults, it works on kids. The psychology of variable reward system doesn't care how old you are. It works because of how human brains respond to uncertainty and reward. The difference between you and a 7-year-old is that you can recognize the system for what it is. You can choose to walk away most of the time. 7-year-old cannot. A child who has grown up associating McDonald's with fun, with prizes, with the play place and the Happy Meal toy, who now opens the app to check their points. That child's not making a free choice. They're the product of a decades-long corporate strategy designed to build brand loyalty before the capacity for critical thinking is even fully developed. Canadian law already recognizes that children deserve special protection from commercial influence. Irwin Toy established that in 1989, 82% of Canadians want the government to act. The evidence of harm is documented. The regulatory gap is clear. What is missing is a legal framework that has caught up to how commercial influence actually works today. We regulate gambling because we accept that variable reward systems are powerful enough to require oversight. Food companies have been running variable reward systems for years on children, on adults, at a national scale. The only reason they face no equivalent scrutiny is that no one has yet required them to. Gamification doesn't ask you to want something. It builds a habit. It conditions behavior. And when systems are designed to do that, especially when they target children, the law cannot afford to treat them as if they are just another ad. When the game isn't just a game, the law not only needs to catch up, it needs to intervene.